Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retro Asylum. I'm Dean Swain and this is the Atari 7800. Not to be confused with its little baby brother. This is the Atari 2600 Junior. Have you played an Atari today? Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Retro Asylum. Before we take a look at the actual Atari 7800 itself, I want to just take a walk down memory lane and look at Atari's history, because by the time the 7800 found its worldwide release, Atari had been owned by 3 different parties. In 1971, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney start a company called Syzygy Engineering, who create the first video arcade game, Computer Space. Quickly realising that no sod can pronounce Syzygy, Bushnell decides to rename the company Atari Incorporated. In 1972, Atari employ an engineer called Alan Acorn, who under Bushnell's instruction creates the arcade game Pong, which, unknown to everyone else at the time, is actually based on another game that had already been developed. Bushnell had previously seen this game on display at a toy fair. With the success of Pong, despite the lawsuits, follow a few more arcade games, and then in 1976 Atari's engineers start work on the video computer system that would later be rebranded as the Atari 2600. Bushnell does not have the capital to complete the project and sells Atari to Warner Communications. He remains at the company until he is fired in December of 1978. With Warner now in full control of Atari, the brand has major success with the Atari 2600, and in 1982 releases the follow-up, the Atari 5200. The trouble is, it's a major flop. The American public can't get their heads around having to upgrade, and to make matters worse, it isn't backwards compatible with 2600 games, even if you plug it into the sand. With a flood of crap games and other systems entering the market, consumers and distributors lose faith, and so the video game crash takes place. Atari then seek help in the form of a team of ex-hackers who had formed a company called General Computer Corporation to create Atari's next console. Whilst GCC are working on Atari's next project, a Japanese company called Nintendo enter negotiations with Atari to release their Famicom console in America under Atari's brand name. Sadly for Atari, the negotiations stall and Nintendo decide that it's best to go it alone. Meanwhile, GCC had now completed work on what would become the Atari 7800. The console was backwards compatible with the majority of 2600 games and also a lot more powerful than the Atari 5200. Due for launch in the middle of 1984, the 7800 was test marketed in Southern California. Sales were good, but not good enough to stop Warner Communications selling Atari to Jack Tramiel just a month after the 7800 was test marketed. Tramiel, who had previously owned Commodore, saw console video games as a fad and took both the Atari 2600 and 7800 off of the shelves. By 1986, Nintendo were having big success with the new Nintendo Entertainment System in America, and so Jack decides that he wants a piece of the cake. The Atari 7800, along with the 2600, is brought back to the market, but it is now a 2-year-old dated system with a massive fight on its hands.
Don Mallard, captain of the U.S. video game team.
When I'm not going for high scores in the arcades, I'm home playing games on my Atari 7800. As an expert, I like the 7800 because there are great arcade hits like Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong Jr., adventure games like Impossible Mission, sports games like Hat Trick and Real Sports Baseball, action games like Desert Falcon and Karateka, And the 7800 plays all the 2600 games. As a consumer, I like the 7800 because most games cost under 20 bucks.
The Atari 7800, the choice of the experts.
Wow, what an exciting commercial that was. I wish I was part of the American team. Right, so let's take a quick look at the package. I bought this from amazon.co.uk for 35 quid. It includes all the leads, a few games, and it was boxed. As you can see on the box, Asteroids was included. Got a few upcoming games on the back. Instructions are in black and white. Old Jack Trammell was cutting costs yet again. Not much to report and just a bit boring. The joypad, however, is exclusive to Europe. These are quite sought after. You've got a little joypad on the top, joystick, sorry. This unscrews, and then you can use the D-pad on the actual pad. It feels quite like a NES controller. It's a little bit stiff, that's probably because it hasn't been used much. Not bad though. Not bad at all. Okay, so the power adapter. Do not buy an Atari 7800 without one of these because they are not your standard Atari adapter. They're twin pin, they fit in the back here. They cost quite a bit to replace if you're lucky enough to find one. So yeah, make sure you buy one with an adapter. Okay, so the cartridges are pretty much the same as 2600 cartridges, silver bordered, and they don't come with a dust flap. Saying that, neither did a lot of the late released 2600 games. Here is Moon Patrol, and as you can see, no dust flap. And don't stick it in there in the wrong way, otherwise you'll break your console. Okay, so as soon as you switch on your PAL 7800, you're greeted with Asteroids. It's a built-in game. The Americans didn't get this. This was exclusive to Europe. So it's nice to have a built-in game. The game was released in America, but on cartridge format only. It's not a bad conversion. It's certainly better than the 2600 version. I still prefer Mindstorm to Retro. Now, I just switched over to emulation footage. The reason I've done this is because the display on the 7800, the output, at least on the PAL version, isn't that great. So I'll be switching over to emulation on each game. This is Mania Challenge. This is actually a Technos arcade game conversion. I find this really quite playable, but the music has got to be it's got to be a contender for the world's worst video game music. It really is awful. So you just end up reaching for the volume control whilst playing this. Yeah, I found this rather addictive, if rather basic. Get up your tarts. Next, I'm testing Moon Patrol. This is the 2600 version. There is no 7800 version, unfortunately. So yeah, this was just to test backwards compatibility. Unfortunately, this TV that I'm displaying it on was having trouble with the output, and yet it's fine on the TV in the kitchen, which is a bit of a shame because the TV in the kitchen's a little bit smaller. But this is a great game. Definitely one of my favourites on the Atari 2600. Okay, Motor Psycho is a 1990 release for the 7800. Again, listen to that music, guys. The 7800 uses the same sound chip as the 2600. So it's really, really pretty basic stuff. I do actually think I prefer the beeper in the 48K Spectrum. Not much to say about this game. I haven't really given it much of a chance. There is a jump button, which sadly I didn't use while I was playing. I was grabbing this bit of footage. But yeah, it's a fast little racer. It's very hard to control. You really have to slow down. This is Choplifter. Great little arcade game. Unfortunately, the 7800 version only appears to have the same background on each level, which is a shame because most other versions, you do get different backgrounds on each level. But it's fairly playable. It's a classic game. Master Systems were the best versions of play. So yeah, that's the Atari 7800. Do I recommend it? I do if you're into your Atari 2600 games and you fancy something a little bit more modern. Anyone else who comes from a NES or Master System background may find it disappointing. Well guys, I hope you've enjoyed our little feature on the Atari 7800. But remember, we don't just produce videos. We are the UK's #1 retro gaming podcast. So please check us out on iTunes or at our website. That's www.retroasylum.com. And remember guys, keep it retro.
Welcome back to the UK's #1 retro gaming podcast.